Welcome to Movie Bites. Today, we're turning the page back to 2002, to a film that was smooth, soulful, and full of love for hip-hop, for the culture, and for that one person who's been in your heart since way back. We're talking about Brown Sugar. From childhood friendships in the Bronx to record labels, messy marriages, love triangles, and freestyles that hit your soul, Brown Sugar had it all. In this video, we're breaking down the full cast, from young Andre and Sidney to grown folks like Taye, Sanaa Lathan, Mos Def, Queen Latifah, and Nicole Ari Parker. We'll show you where they were then and where they are now in 2025. So sit back, hit that like button, and let's take a trip through the music, the love, and the real ones who brought Brown Sugar to life. First up is Mark John Jeffries, the kid who played the younger version of Andre. Now, if you were growing up in the 90s or early 2000s, this is a face you remember. He felt like that kid from down the block, that little brother you watched come into his own, one role at a time, the kind of kid who felt like he belonged to all of us. In Brown Sugar, he's a 12-year-old boy with hip-hop running through his veins. A kid who, like so many of us, came up sneaking out with friends, chasing the sound of a beat down the block, hoping to soak up every bar and every lyric like it was holy. Young Andre and Sidney weren't just friends, they were mirrors of a whole generation of Black kids. Hip-hop wasn't just music for them, it was home. It was belonging. It was that thing that spoke for you when words weren't enough. Mark had that special energy that made those moments feel so real. He started acting at 5, making his debut in Losing Isaiah, and quickly became one of those young actors you'd spot everywhere. From Stuart Little 2 and The Haunted Mansion to Get Rich or Die Trying, he was popping up in films that shaped an era. And on TV, he was doing spots on shows like Hanging with Mr. Cooper and The Tracy Morgan Show. By the time he was 12, he felt like a rising star, a kid destined for greatness. Today, Mark John Jeffries is 35. He's still acting, doing smaller roles and popping up in indie projects, but that big breakout role as an adult? It never came. And that's the part that stings. Not just for him, but for all of us who watched him grow up on screen. In a lot of ways, he felt like one of our own. We rooted for him because we saw ourselves and our little brothers, cousins, and friends in him. We watched him stand tall next to the biggest names, knowing he had the talent, the charm, the heart, and hoping Hollywood would give him the chance to show it. It's a reminder of how this industry can forget its own too quickly. But for those of us who remember, Mark John Jeffries will always be more than just a face. He's a piece of that era, a piece of ourselves. And no matter where life takes him, he'll always be that kid with the headphones on, chasing a beat, reminding us why hip-hop and belonging meant so much to all of us. Next up is Sidney, played by Aaliyah Hill. And if you came up in a place like the Bronx, Bed-Stuy, South Central, or any block where hip-hop shaped the sound of your childhood, then you already know a girl like Sidney. You knew her. You went to school with her. You shared a piece of the same world. She was that shy, quiet sister from around the way, the one with a book bag over one shoulder and a smile that felt like home. The kind of girl who grew up surrounded by boom boxes, blasting from windows, and Uncle So-and-so yelling from the stoop. The one who learned to find herself in the music that came out of those speakers. Aaliyah was only 13 when she stepped into this role, making her film debut in Brown Sugar. And she gave us a character that felt like a lot of our childhood best friends. Sidney and Andre weren't just friends. They were a piece of that era when hip-hop was more than music. It was belonging. It was survival. It was belonging to a block that felt like a second family. It was Saturday morning trips to the record shop, Friday nights with a tape deck, and long walks after school arguing about Biggie versus Nas. It was the sound of a generation, and she captured it. That's why seeing Aaliyah Hill as Sidney felt like seeing ourselves. Even after Brown Sugar, when she didn't land any huge roles, and her last credited film was in 2015, she left a mark, one that reminds a lot of us of ourselves, or the sister down the hall, or that childhood best friend we lost track of when life pulled us in different directions. Today she's 35, living a quieter life away from the spotlight, And while we don't know where she is or what she's doing, I hope she knows how much that role meant to people who came up in neighborhoods where hip-hop shaped who we were. For those of us who watched Brown Sugar, Aaliyah Hill will always be a piece of that story. That reminder that long before the world noticed, hip-hop was ours. It was in our blood, in our neighborhoods, and in the friendships that felt like family. Whatever she's doing today, I just pray she's doing well. And I hope she knows she gave a piece of herself to a moment so many of us still carry in our hearts. Taking center stage in Brown Sugar is Andre, the grown-up version of the character we met as a kid, now brought to life by Taye Diggs. By this point, Andre has leveled up. He's a man with a solid career, working at a major record label called Millennium Records, and he's about to marry a beautiful woman. Except she's not Sidney. What's wild is that he and Sidney have kept their bond intact, still friends after all these years, still sharing that deep love for hip-hop that shaped both of their lives. But if you came up in neighborhoods where hip-hop felt like a second language, you can relate to Andre. You understand that tension. Being a man with a 9-to-5 in a suit, trying to fit into corporate spaces that never really fit you. Andre was passionate about music, about putting people on, about making sure the culture came first. Yet here he was, stuck at Millennium Records, surrounded by corny artists and watered-down ideas, and he had no say in any of it. The frustration felt too real, too familiar. Too many of us have watched talented brothers get boxed in by a system that doesn't respect where they came from. So when Andre finally walks away from the label, with a lot of help and encouragement from Sidney, it felt like a win for every kid that came up in a neighborhood that said, "Bet on yourself." Together, they launched their own label, and that was the moment that made you stand up and cheer. But Andre wasn't perfect. Let's be real. Sometimes he acted like a selfish man-child, making choices that felt more about ego than heart. And that's what made him human, and why so many of us felt connected to him. Taye Diggs was 31 when he stepped into this role, and by then he was already making a name for himself. He exploded onto the scene in the late 90s with How Stella Got Her Groove Back, and quickly followed that up with roles in classics like The Wood and The Best Man, films that defined a whole era for Black culture. On TV, he brought that same charm to shows like New York Undercover, Ally McBeal, and The West Wing. After Brown Sugar, he kept shining with roles in Private Practice, Empire, and later came full circle with The Best Man, The Final Chapters. Today, Taye Diggs is 54 and still going strong, still acting, still captivating audiences. To this day, when I watch Brown Sugar, I don't just see an actor playing a role. I see a piece of ourselves. The best parts, the worst parts, and everything in between. The kid who came up loving hip-hop, chasing a dream, making mistakes, and finding a way to rise above it all. And that's why he'll always be remembered. Moving on, we've got a character I've always felt for, Reese, played by the beautiful Nicole Ari Parker. And let's be real, this is one of those moments that a lot of sisters out there can relate to. I know some of y'all will say she got what she deserved for cheating, but I have to ask, for how long can a person stay loyal to a love that doesn't feed their spirit? How long can a Black woman give, support, pray, and stand by a man who never really lets her in? That was Reese. Reese was a good woman, a loving wife, a ride-or-die sister, a believer in the vows she made. But she was married to Andre, a man acting like a man-child, too distracted chasing dreams and ego to notice the queen right beside him. Too many sisters have been in this space. Too many of our aunties, cousins, and friends have lived that quiet heartbreak, being the backbone for a man who doesn't know how to carry the weight when it's his turn. Reese supported him. She tried, but every major decision, every big moment, he acted like she didn't matter. Sound familiar? It's that sting of loving hard and being met with silence. It's the pain of knowing your worth, but hoping the person you gave your heart to will finally open their eyes and see it too. So when Reese stepped out, when she crossed that line, it wasn't about betrayal for betrayal's sake. It felt like desperation. The cries of a heart that felt unseen for too long. And when Andre found out and felt relieved, that was toxic in itself. What kind of man finds peace when he catches his wife cheating? The kind of man who was gone long before that moment ever happened. Nicole Ari Parker was 32 when she brought this role to life, and she played Reese with a quiet strength, an ache that felt too real for so many of us. She captured the beauty and heartbreak of being that sister. Strong enough to carry a family, loyal enough to stand by a man, and strong enough to walk away when it no longer served her. For many, this character felt like looking in the mirror. A reminder that Black women deserve more than being an afterthought. They deserve a love that sees them, hears them, and shows up for them every day. And doesn't she favor Tyra Banks? It's easy to mistake one for the other. Both of them just radiate beauty and strength. Before Brown Sugar, Nicole had appeared in a bunch of smaller films in the late 90s, but her breakthrough came with Remember the Titans in 2000. After that, she went on to grace films like Welcome Home, Roscoe Jenkins, Black Dynamite, and Almost Christmas. On TV, she kept shining, from Soul Food to Real Husbands of Hollywood, Rosewood, and Empire. Today, Nicole Ari Parker is 54 and still lighting up screens, still reminding us why we fell in love with her in the first place. And here's a beautiful piece of Black love. Her real-life husband, Boris Kodjoe, was also in Brown Sugar. We'll be checking in with him soon. But as for Reese, she'll always be that sister many of us recognize, the one who learned the hard way that her worth doesn't diminish when she walks away. Sometimes it shines brighter. And for every sister who's ever felt unseen, overlooked, or taken for granted, this one was for you. Up next is Sidney, brought to life by the ever-radiant Sanaa Lathan. And if I've mispronounced that beautiful name in the past, my apologies. Sidney was that sister who grew up loving hip-hop, living and breathing it every day. By the time we meet her in Brown Sugar, she's making her mark as the editor-in-chief of Double XL. Living proof that a girl from the block can rise to the top doing what she loves. What made Sidney special was how she showed up for the people she loved, especially Andre. Ever since they were kids, Sidney and Andre shared a bond rooted in music, in moments that shaped both of their lives. But as adults, that bond was tested. Andre went and married another woman. He built a whole life with Reese, put a ring on her finger, acted like Sidney was just a chapter he left behind. Yet the second Sidney found happiness with another man, suddenly he couldn't stand it. Suddenly he felt like he had a claim over a heart he refused to fully deserve. That's the part that stings for so many sisters watching this film. The way Andre tried to have it both ways, too spoiled, too immature to accept Sidney finding her worth, too selfish to let her walk away. It's the story so many of us have lived, loving a man deeply, supporting him as he finds himself, only for him to forget that you deserve more than being someone's second choice. Sidney didn't deserve that. Not when she was always there. Not when she gave him space to evolve. Not when she tried to walk away with grace and dignity. But that's why her character shines so bright all these years later. She reminds every sister that you don't have to wait around for a man to recognize your worth. You deserve a love that chooses you openly, boldly, every time. At 31, Sanaa Lathan gave this role a quiet strength that felt too real. We already knew her as the sister who captured magic in Love and Basketball and brought depth to disappearing acts. And here she embodied Sidney with grace, grit, and vulnerability. Today, she's 53, still captivating, still reminding the world why she's a Black treasure, a timeless beauty, and a powerhouse of talent. For every sister who's been in Sidney's shoes, this one's for you. You deserve the kind of love that shows up, stays committed, and knows your worth from the very start. Sidney learned it, and in that lesson, she spoke for all of us. Up next is Francine, brought to life by none other than the First Lady of hip-hop herself, Queen Latifah. Francine wasn't just Sidney's cousin. She was that sister friend every Black woman needs. The one who will pour you a drink, sit you down, and tell you the truth, even when it stings. Francine had been through the fire herself. She was divorced, she knew heartbreak, and she knew that finding a soulmate was like finding a rare gem buried deep in the concrete of everyday life. But despite that, she refused to be bitter or uptight. Francine lived life like every day could be a chapter worth telling, bold, carefree, and loving hard. And she tried to give that same energy to Sidney. When she urged Sidney to crash Andre's wedding, It came from a place of knowing. Francine had seen how quickly moments can slip away, and she refused to watch her best friend let fear and hesitation write her story. Even when Sidney declined, Francine didn't judge. She just kept loving, kept supporting, knowing that true connections have a way of finding their path. That's why it felt so right when Francine herself found her match in Chris by the end. She was the kind of woman who had lived it, learned from it, and came out stronger, and seeing her win felt like a win for every sister who knows the sting of starting over. Queen Latifah was 32 when she stepped into Francine's role, already a powerhouse with a resume that spoke for itself. By then, she had blazed trails in films like Jungle Fever, House Party 2, Juice, and Set It Off, and was holding it down on the small screen with Living Single and The Queen Latifah Show. And after Brown Sugar, she only kept rising, with hits like Scary Movie 3, Barbershop 2, Taxi, Beauty Shop, and Just Right. And of course, we can't forget, she's one of the best female rappers to ever grace the mic. She gave voice to the struggles, victories, and everyday beauty of Black womanhood. Today, at 55, Queen Latifah is still shining, still breaking boundaries, and still reminding the world why she's a living legend. In every scene she graces, every lyric she delivers, every role she plays, she is, and always will be, a queen. Then we have Kelby, played by Boris Kodjoe. And man, if this wasn't the poster boy for Nice Guy Finishes Last, I don't know what is. Kelby was that brother. Tall, fine, smooth as silk, doing everything a man can do to win a sister over. He was cooking meals, sending flowers, putting in that effort like he was trying to win a BT award for simping. But no matter how hard he tried, he was never that dude for Sidney. And that's the sad part. You can't force a vibe that ain't there. Just like Reese could never truly win Andre's heart, Kelby was in that same lane, a good man chasing a woman whose heart was already somewhere else. All the gifts, the trips, the cooking, it amounted to nothing. He was like a backup dancer in a music video, there doing the moves, putting in the work, but always outshined when the main act stepped in. That proposal scene? Man, that was brutal. The hesitation on Sidney's face said it all. It was like watching a brother drop to one knee and propose to a woman who already checked out. And when she eventually broke it off and went running back to Andre, let's just call it what it was, a funeral for all that simpin'. Boris Kodjoe was 29 when he played this role, and to be real, he owned that too good for his own good character. But life doesn't always reward effort when the heart's already elsewhere, and that's the lesson Kelby learned the hard way. It's one thing to be a good man, but another thing to be in the wrong story. Today, Boris is 52, still making moves and doing well for himself, living that good life with his wife, Nicole Ari Parker, and their 2 kids. But every time I think about Kelby, I just want to pour one out for the brother, because that man came with flowers and a 5-star dinner, only to walk away with a heartbreak-to-go plate. Next up on our list is Dante Terrell Smith, better known to many as Mos Def, who brought Chris to life in Brown Sugar. Chris was that talented, sharp-witted guy who could light up a room just by grabbing a microphone. You could tell he was the real deal, a guy born to spit bars and make people feel every word. Andre spots him at an event and is instantly drawn in, like a moth to a flame. He knows raw talent when he sees it, and he quickly realizes that this guy is special, the kind of voice that could carry a whole era. But when Andre tries to sign him to Millennium Records, Chris doesn't bite. He knows the label's reputation for cranking out corny, cookie-cutter artists, and he wasn't about to lose his soul for a quick contract. At that point, he'd rather stick with his day job, driving a cab, than sign away his voice to a machine that didn't respect the culture. It's only when Andre finally leaves Millennium and starts his own label, Brown Sugar, that Chris takes the leap. Suddenly, it's more than just business. It's about belonging, about making music that means something. The 2 form a bond built on mutual respect and a shared love for hip-hop. Mos Def was 29 when he stepped into the role of Chris, and he was already making waves long before that. By the time he landed in Brown Sugar, he'd appeared in films like God Bless the Child, The Hard Way, Bamboozled, and Island of the Dead. But even more than acting, Mos had cemented himself as one of hip-hop's sharpest MCs. starting his music career in 1994 and gaining a reputation as one of the best to ever pick up a mic. Today, at 51, Mos Def has weathered the controversies that come with a long and outspoken career. But one thing no one can take away from him is this. When it comes to lyricism, flow, and passion for the craft, he's a timeless icon. An artist, an actor, an MC, and in Brown Sugar, one of the beating hearts of a film that celebrated hip-hop like few others ever have. Up next is Richard, played by Keith Tisdale. Now, this brother looked like he stayed in the gym. Tight shirt, smooth talk, and always shooting his shot. This time, his target was Reese, who, by the way, was married to Andre. They ended up going on a little date, but that date went south real quick when Andre caught them. And the crazy part? Andre wasn't even mad. He was low-key happy about it. That moment was wild, and Richard was left standing there like, what the hell just happened? Keith Tisdale was 28 at the time, and this was actually his film debut. After Brown Sugar, he popped up in a few TV shows here and there, including 2 episodes of Criminal Minds. But in 2016, he was allegedly involved in some legal trouble for defrauding one of his Criminal Minds co-stars. It was a messy situation that nearly landed him in jail. Today, he's 51 years old and has kept a pretty low profile. Whether or not the industry shut the door on him, we don't know for sure, but he hasn't been making noise in Hollywood lately. We all know that boss. That one boss who don't give a damn about your passion, your vision, or the blood, sweat, and tears you put into your work as long as the cash keeps flowing. In Brown Sugar, that boss was Simon, played to perfection by Wendell Pierce. Simon was the head man over at Millennium Records, where Andre was breaking his back, trying to push real talent through the door. But let's keep it real. Simon wasn't trying to hear all that. See, Simon was that greedy type. The kind of dude who'd sell out the culture in a heartbeat if it meant moving a few more records. He didn't care if the artist had soul or if the music was trash. As long as it sold, Simon was clapping his hands and counting his money. Every time Andre came through with an artist who actually had bars, who actually had something to say, Simon would shut him down. Nah, Simon wanted the gimmicks, the bubblegum rap, the kind of stuff that made the real heads shake their damn heads. And you felt that tension, that frustration that so many of us from the Black community know too well. When you're trying to elevate the culture, trying to stay true to what built you, but you got someone at the top who only sees dollar signs. Wendell Pierce made that role hit home because he played Simon exactly how those bosses feel in real life. Detached, out of touch, and all about that paper. And make no mistake, Wendell had already proven he could bring that weight to a role. At 39, when he played Simon, he'd already been in classics like A Rage in Harlem, Malcolm X, Waiting to Exhale, Get on the Bus, and Bulworth. And of course, he gave us unforgettable moments on TV in The Wire, where he showed just how deep his acting chops ran, and later in Power Book 3. Today, Wendell's 62 and still killing it. The man's been in the game for decades, and he's still showing up, still representing. But in Brown Sugar, he gave us a boss that reminded every one of us what it's like to have our dreams stepped on by somebody who don't understand or care about the culture. And for that, we felt every bit of Andre's frustration. And speaking of Simon chasing the bag, one of the biggest messes he tried to force down our throats was that tragic rap duo, Ren and Ten. Man, these two were the definition of you're only signed because the boss don't know better. Pure cornball energy. The kind of rappers you wouldn't play in the whip if someone paid you. They weren't about the culture, weren't about the craft, just about making a quick dollar and embarrassing hip-hop in the process. One half of this disaster was Ren, played by Eric Weiner. Ren was that overhyped, try too hard, let me spit a bar right in your face kind of guy, and every word felt like nails on a chalkboard. He acted like that awkward white kid at the cookout, bouncing around, making noise, hoping somebody would mistake him for an MC. Meanwhile, you're just wishing somebody would tap him on the shoulder and say, "Bruh, just stick to being a fan. Not everyone needs to pick up a mic." He was one of those rappers you wouldn't listen to. You'd listen at, just long enough to laugh, then skip. The man was a walking skit, a reminder that hip-hop doesn't owe a lane to every goofy wannabe trying to ride its wave. Eric Weiner was 34 when he played Ren, and this was his big film debut, a role he nailed because it felt like he was born to play this exact character. He didn't land any huge roles after this, but he found a quiet lane for himself in Hollywood, popping up here and there and doing work behind the scenes, like co-writing and directing for shows like The Goldbergs. Today, at 48, he's still out here doing his thing, just nowhere near a microphone. And honestly, the culture's better for it. Ren and 10 gave us some of the best unintentional comedy in Brown Sugar, reminding us that hip-hop may evolve, but it never forgets its imposters. And that some people are better kept off the air and far away from the BET stage. And then we had the other half of that tragic mess, Reggie Wins, aka 10. Compared to Ren, he was the chill one, but don't get it twisted, that didn't make him any less corny. He was just a quieter version of the same disaster. Together, these two gave us some of the scorniest, funniest rap moments in Black cinema. I mean, their song, The Hoe Is Mine, didn't win any BET awards, and rightfully so, but it sure won a spot in our hearts for being so bad it was good. 10 was like that one homie in the crew who doesn't say much, but when he finally speaks, you're like, bruh, you could have kept that to yourself. The bars were suspect, the swagger was questionable, and the music was, well, let's just call it memorable for all the wrong reasons. Reggie Wins was 33 when he played 10, and after Brown Sugar, he didn't do much acting. He had a small role in Serendipity in 2001, and then he fell back like a guy leaving a party that he knows he crashed. Today, he's 56 and living a quiet, private life far from the spotlight. And honestly, respect to him for knowing when to tap out. He never made it as an accomplished actor, but we'll give him his flowers for this one. Because when he said the hoe is mine, for some reason, we believed him. And as scorny as that track was, 10 will always have a tiny spot in hip-hop movie history. Even if it's just as a punchline, we'll never forget. Then came that scene that hit close to home for anybody who's ever had to hustle just to be heard. Andre stepping up to Hot 97, blazing hip-hop, trying to get Chris's music on the air. Now, if you grew up loving hip-hop, you know that radio stations back in the day, they were like fortresses. You could have the dopest sound in the streets, but if the gatekeepers didn't rock with you, your joint wasn't making it past the parking lot. And that gatekeeper was Trish, played by Rosalind Coleman. Man, Trish was the type of radio exec you'd pray you didn't get. She was on the phone when Andre came in, didn't pause, didn't give him the courtesy of eye contact, just kept it moving like he was a fly in her office. That's that energy a lot of brothers and sisters faced back then. When you're grinding with everything you got, and they treat you like you're begging instead of bringing talent. That scene hit hard because so many of us have felt that, walking into spaces where they look down on you just because you're coming up the hard way. Rosalind Coleman was 37 at the time, and she played that role too well, because we've all met a Trish. But beyond that, Rosalind is a force. She shared the screen with legends, Meryl Streep, Viola Davis, Samuel L. Jackson, Halle Berry, Tom Cruise, and then turned around and directed award-winning short films like Allergic to Nuts and Drawing Angel. She's proof that while folks might try to block your shine, if you stay on your grind, your light's gonna break through anyway. Today she's 59, still out here making waves, still building her legacy. And that scene reminds us of what so many of our people went through and still go through. And that's why we respect the hustle. The beautiful Tox Olagundoy also graced Brown Sugar with her presence, even if it was just for a brief moment. She played Sidney's assistant. You know, that one who was always on point, keeping things moving behind the scenes while Sidney was out chasing stories and holding down hip-hop culture. We first see her attending to her boss, handling business with that cool professional vibe that made you wish she had more screen time. Tox was just 27 at the time, and Brown Sugar actually marked her film debut. Even with just that small appearance, she left an impression. After this, she went on to pop up in The Salon in 2005, but many of y'all probably know her best from TV, where she really shined, especially in The Neighbors and the hit drama Castle. Today, Tox is 49 and still doing her thing, continuing to bring that beauty, grace, and talent to every role she takes on. Sometimes it's the small roles that deserve the biggest shout-outs, and Talks definitely earned hers. And finally, we've got the one and only Angie Martinez, the voice of New York herself, making a special appearance in Brown Sugar. And when I say special, I mean it felt like watching the culture acknowledge itself. In this scene, she's doing what she's always done best, holding down the airwaves and making space for hip-hop to tell its truth. Sidney walks into that radio station with a heart full of memories and a love for the music that shaped her life, and Angie gives her the room to speak, the room that so many of us have longed for when we needed to be heard. Then comes that moment. Angie invites the listeners to call in, and who's on the line? Andre. Suddenly, that phone call becomes more than words across the air. It becomes a moment that felt like a piece of ourselves. It's that crackle between the radio and the heart where the truth came pouring out. Sidney telling Andre she's loved him her whole life. Pure magic. Angie Martinez was 31 when she stepped into that role, and she brought a level of authenticity only she could. Angie has always been more than a radio host. She's been a witness, a voice, and a sister to the culture. Today she's 54, still blazing her trail and reminding us why we fell in love with hip-hop in the first place. She stepped away from acting, but she never left the heart of the culture. And for that, she's cherished, she's respected, and she'll always be a voice that feels like home. And just like that, we've reached the end. Brown Sugar was more than just a movie. It was a vibe, a story about love, hip-hop, and everything in between. Whether you watched it for the romance, the music, or just to see your favorite stars shine, this film gave us moments we still hold close. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to Movie Bites, where we keep the classics alive and celebrate the culture, one film at a time. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.